go. Testing. Stream chats loading up. Hi guys, just joining the stream. Just give it a second, waiting for everything to balance out and start up properly, and then I'm going to start this one. A little bit unannounced this time. I usually do a preview announcement of what video I'm going to do, but I found myself with a little bit of time this afternoon, so I thought I'd do a video today. I've got 2 videos due to do this week, and then I've only got one evening when I'm going to be free to do the other one, so I thought, well, I'll do this one while I've got a chance now. So we'll just give it a second, make sure everything's all logged on, so bear with me a minute. And I will throw this onto, I need to check the stream's running, so bear with me a second guys. Yeah, looks like we're all good. Just going to make a quick edit here. I can re-edit this when it goes up online. How's it going, Rich? You alright? I'm from Ashmore Park, mate, in case you were wondering. From Ashmore Park, I live just over the back now. How's it going, Si? Thanks for joining us, man. I'm just making a few edits to this. I've done this in a bit of a rush and forgotten to do a couple of things, so I'm just setting those straight now. There we go. That's better. You should see a change on your screen now to the text at the top. Make a bit more sense now. Yeah, are you from Wolverhampton as well also, Rich? I know that Si is below. You've never been to our events, mate. You really should get along. Anyway, right, so I'm on, guys. Looks like the streams are running fine. So I'm just going to knock this page on the head here so I don't choke my stream. And do let me know if there's any problems with the stream, if it stutters or anything like that. You are in technical side. I didn't know exactly where you lived. I figured based on the pictures I've seen of you. Fair play to you. No, I'm over near the sticks myself. We're right in the corner, aren't we? Where we are. So we're heading into Shropshire and Staffs where we are. Oh, you're both over in Tettenhall. Fair play, fair play. It's good to see some locals representing anyway. It's yeah, it's like we do our best to represent for the Midlands with revival and with everything I do, really, to be honest. I like try and represent for the Midlands, but there doesn't seem to be as many of us around here as there is elsewhere, and that's why whenever I do the events and that, I try and keep everything Midlands, get all the local traders in, make sure I capture everybody who's coming together for a love of gaming together, and the more people from the Midlands, the better, to be honest. Right, anyway, guys, so yeah, doing a video today, just explain briefly in case you missed it. I was meant to be doing 2 this week. I've got another video I want to do on another device from around this time, but I just haven't had a chance to get around to doing it yet. It was my birthday last week. This is the first video I'm doing when I'm 40. I don't look much different. I just haven't bothered to do my hair today. But yeah, turned the big 4-hour last weekend, and it was a real good one, to be honest. And we just finished a bit of a week's break, so now I'm just kind of starting to get back to everything now. Well, I've been carrying on my projects anyway, as most of you know, and I've been working on modifying the last few consoles now that I haven't had chance to get fully modified up. As everyone knows, I don't like to collect games. I only like to collect hardware, and so I'm always looking for flash solutions for most consoles. And most of the consoles I've now got EverDrives for, I've got flash drives for, I've got flash carts, multi-carts for. There's only a few left now to do, and I'm starting to hunt down. Now, some of them, the reason being, is that there wasn't actually a good flash solution available for several of them initially, and now there's starting to be some solutions. And quite surprising of those are some of the more popular consoles. Optical drive emulators are something that have been starting to appear in the last 2, 3 years, and we've now got solutions for several of the CD-based systems. Unlike the old consoles that use cartridges and things like that, or the old computers which have got, serial interfaces and things like that, it's hard to create a flash device for an optical drive system, because you tend to have to replace the entire drive system. Now, the CD-based consoles, the DVD-based consoles, they're all going to suffer from the same thing eventually, and that is going to be optical drive failure. Um, PlayStations are dropping at an enormous rate. Um, Thinking PS2s, quite a lot of PS2s have drive failures. Dreamcasts certainly do. Um, there's a lot where the drives aren't doing too well. Some of the early ones, especially like the Neo Geo CD, the Mega CD, PC Engine CD, and but there's the solution starting to appear for most of them now. Now, the one system that didn't, how's it going, Tony? All right, mate. The one system that didn't generally have one, and is quite a popular system, unfortunately, is the Sega Saturn. And there has been a solution created in the last couple of years, thankfully, but there's been a big problem in getting it. The guy who makes the GDMU for the Dreamcast. He makes a device called the Rhea/Phoebe, depending on which model Saturn you're installing it into, depending on which device you actually order. And the device, unfortunately, like his GDMU, he has strangled supply of it. He hasn't kept up with demand. He hasn't kept up with supply, and unfortunately, people just can't get a hold of the device for love nor money. I've seen Saturns on eBay that have been finally modified with that device, going for £500 and £600 because people know they just can't get hold of it. And so other people have been starting to look at solutions for this system. Now, there's been a few teased out in the last couple of years. The Rhea and the Phoebe, in case you're wondering, the names they're two of the moons of Saturn. And so he decided to call them appropriately like that, which is quite a cool idea. But unfortunately, he has choked supply so badly, probably to control prices, but he claims it's to control hardware creation and firmware security to stop people cloning it. He's been strangling it basically, and he's not got a very good attitude. And so he's got a really convoluted order process whereby you have to. He barely announces that he's going to produce a batch, and then you have to be online at a certain time. And he makes so few available. They've gone in second. It's like waiting for tickets on Ticketmaster, but far less available. It's just stupid. And he's been doing it now for the last couple of years, and everybody's sick of him. And this is why you've started to see the GDMU clones appear on the market for the Dreamcast. Well, people have been asking for a Saturn solution for a long time, and a few have been teased. One of the major ones was a device called the Satiator, and the device was very interesting to a lot of people because I think the guy was one of the first ones to crack the security in the Saturn properly, and he'd created this device which actually went into the MPEG media card slot on the rear of the console. And now that would have generally been the best solution for a Saturn because it would require not modifying anything. However, if you follow the progress of that project, bear in mind it's been in progress now for 4 years. I don't think they're very much further up the street than they should be by now. They've barely moved. I imagine there's probably a few more challenges involved with it than they thought, and that's understandable. But 4 years and counting now, and of course other people have now beat them to the punch. And with Saturns having quite a high failure rate of the CD drives, it's unsurprising that people have just gone for the most obvious solution, which is for an optical drive emulator. Now, one of the people who've done this, there's been a couple come up recently. One of them is a device called the Fenrir, which is, I'm not sure who makes that one, but that is in limited supply at the moment. It's pretty new, and it is the cheapest option. From what I understand, I think a Fenrir will only set you back about 90 quid, and that's pretty good going considering. However, it is lacking some features at the moment. It's lacking multi-disc support. I don't think they've updated the firmware yet. So if you've got a game where it involves swapping discs midway through the game, you can't actually do that on the Fenrir yet. I don't know if it fully supports multi-region, and I'm pretty sure it doesn't support that many different disc formats. So the Fenrir, it's decent from what I've seen on videos, but it is the budget option at the moment. You then of course you've got the from the makers of GDMU, you've got the rear and the Phoebe. That is a kind of midway point between the two. I'm not sure what the retail is on that right now, but the last I checked, it was about 130, 140 pounds. I could be mistaken on that, but that sounds about right. So that was like the midway point. However, I've been setting my friend's system up with one of those recently, and even though it works well when it's up and running, you do only have the restriction of a basic text interface. Um, it's also very picky about the images that you use. Now, when it comes to making flashcards and using EverDrives and things like that, most EverDrives will take most formats thrown at it. So, for example, on the SNES, you would have the .sfc format. I think you would get .bin on Mega Drive and also .md. But you can also get there's several different extensions, but most of them will work when you throw them into an EverDrive. When it comes to disk formats, however, the situation's a little bit different, and I suppose it's one of the challenges in actually having to emulate the optical drive in these systems. I guess it's expecting to see a certain type of code, and you're going to need bigger FPGA chips if you're going to want it to decode the different CD formats if it's emulating the drive in some way. And some people are better at doing that than others. Now, the rear and the Phoebe, it is quite picky. It likes MDF and MDS files for ISOs, which is like a burning format, so that's kind of strange that it reads that. It does like bin and Q files, but only if there's a single audio track bin file. So if you've got multiple bin files, you have to compile those together. If you've got any other format, it can be quite annoying. It prefers the CDI format, which is the best, but converting to CDI isn't always that straightforward. So yeah, and you have to use an annoying program to compile it all together. And even when you do that, you find that some of them don't work. You have to go through an extensive renaming process, and just throwing on an extra game is quite long-winded. When I was setting up my friend's rear device recently, I tore my hair out with it a little bit, but I did set it up nice in the end. But if I was to go back now and add new games to it, it'd be quite a convoluted process. So, not a big fan of that device myself. And I'm glad really I didn't wait for it. Great that he got it at a bargain price, but yeah, it's not the ideal system. So, in terms of other systems, Satiator, forget about waiting for it. It's going to be a while off if it comes, and it's still in beta testing at the moment. So the best option I've found anyway has come from Terraonion, and it's this. It's the MODE, which stands for Multiple Optical Disc Emulator. Now, this is quite a bit pricier than the other optical drive devices, and that's because it doesn't only support the Saturn, it supports the Dreamcast as well. It's a fairly largish board. If I just pop open the Saturn here that I've got installed into, you should just about be able to see inside. You can see the mode board there installed in place of the old CD drive. And over to the side, it's got a USB port. It's got an SD card reader down the bottom end there. It's got a couple of admin buttons on it. And it's got two connections on the side there for the different ribbon cables, depending on which Saturn you're installing into. And what you can't see is on the underside of it, it's actually got a direct port for plugging it into a Dreamcast. Now, the reason it's a big board and the reason there's a big square drawn onto it there is because it also supports hard drives. Now, obviously, when you move into disk-based platforms, you have issues with storage because you're going to need to get a full library on. A 16 gigabyte SD card just isn't going to cut it like you'd be using for an EverDrive, for example. and so you need the bigger storage spaces. And this device, as I say, is designed to be used with a Saturn and a Dreamcast. So if you want to install, if you want to use one device on two different systems, you can actually use one hard drive, store them all on there, and depending on which one you put it on, it will automatically recognise the Dreamcast games or the Saturn games, which is brilliant. You know, don't get me wrong, it's a great feature. The practicality of that, I have to question slightly, because the Dreamcast, you know, you're gonna have to dismantle your system to do it. You can't just like plug it into a jack on the back. You've got to physically take it out the system and swap it over. So I don't know why people would want to do that. Some people have said that that's what they've done. Personally, I wouldn't go down that route. I would use a separate system for each device. But I'll go a little bit more into that in a minute anyway. So the device itself, yeah, it costs 200 euros, which when you translate it into pounds with the shipping, works out to be about the same. But it's also manufactured and shipped from Andorra, which is outside of the EU. So inevitably, when it arrives here, you have to pay import charges. Now, the import charges on this to the UK at the time of making this video were £42, I believe. So you have to pay that when it arrives. So it's cost £240 altogether. It's great that I'm going to get to preserve my Saturn now, and it is the best device available for this. It's got a whole load of features that the other ones don't have, so I'm going to go into those just now. Installing it was a little bit of a problem. I'll just explain that now. This device is designed for all Saturns, and I think all Dreamcasts as well. So they've made the device as versatile as possible. So it's got a lot of ports on it. So I understand where the manufacturing costs are going to come in, putting all those ports on and adding support for all of those. For those people who don't know, there were two models of the Saturn, which nobody ever seems to appreciate because it's not that obvious on face value. And I do happen to have both Saturns right here. So this on the left is a Model 1. And for those people who don't know, this was the first one that came out. And if you compare it to this one, you'll notice some slight differences. First of all, the Sega logo is absent from the front of that. It's now on the front of the Model 2, which I've got there on the right. And you'll notice the operation deck on the top is slightly different. So you've got oval buttons for power and reset on the top. You've got round buttons on the Model 2. You've got your open lid switch there, which is slightly different shaped. And you've got this kind of shiny plastic here rather than just the matte there. As with a lot of Sega things, when they move the models along, they tend to cost save a little bit to create the successor models to, well, make a bit more profit, I suppose, and to bring the cost down for the consumer. Inside there's actually a power LED and a disk access LED. The Model 2 doesn't have a disk access LED, so if you've got a failing drive or you're checking if something's loading on a black screen, you've got no physical indicator of if it's reading or not, which can be problematic if your drive is starting to fail. I do like the disk access light on this one, but obviously there were saving costs. The way they actually fit together inside has changed a lot. It's got internal power supply, the Sega Saturn has, and they mounted it in several different places. So in the Model 1, it was actually mounted, well, it was mounted in the base, but the very first Model 1s, like this one here, it's actually attached to the lid. So I think it's on the left-hand side in here. The power supply module is actually up there. And then you've got a load of things attached to the lid here where the LEDs and the switches and everything attach. The Model 2 is a lot simpler. You just lift the lid off and it's all there mounted in the base. However, when it comes to changing the drive or messing with the drive, the installation is actually a little bit more complex in the Model 2 because you have to remove the support stumps for the drive itself, and that involves taking the motherboard up to be able to get underneath the RF shield. On the Model 1 you don't actually have to do that, you can remove them from the top. So a little bit complicated anyway. Oh, and the other difference was there was a Model 1 control pad, which I do like, but they improved it with the Model 2. It just feels a lot more comfortable in your hand. It's a little bit smaller, and this is the model that people tend to prefer, this joypad to this one. These ones are a little bit more collectible now because there's not as many kicking about. But anyway, enough of the version differences there. Yeah, this device is designed for both systems. My intention was to install this into my Model 1. Now, my Model 1 was originally, I had it chipped. I had a mod chip in there, and I used to run copies because that was the only option outside of running original games because there was no optical drive emulator. However, running copies on the Saturn, this is one of those systems that wears down a lot faster than a lot of other consoles. They always used to say that playing copies could damage your drives. That was definitely true on the Saturn and the Dreamcast because the way it reads, I believe it tends to read outside of the normal sectors, which forces the laser to read in parts that it really shouldn't do, and to seek around the disc in ways that it shouldn't do. And so it wears out the lasers on a Saturn rather quickly. Now I installed the mod chip myself on my Model 1. It was quite easy to do. It ran fine for a while, and then I started to experience problems, and so I believed the optical drive was failing, the CD laser. So that was put to one side for a while, and then what I would do is I had my Model 2. I didn't move the mod chip over because I wanted to keep my Model 1. What I did is I actually bought a pseudo Saturn Kai cartridge, which is a modified action replay cartridge that allows you to boot copies and input action replay codes, and that just goes into the Saturn's RAM expansion cartridge port, like the action replay cartridge does, and allows you to play copies once you've got that in. So that's how I've been using my Saturn up until now. But I knew that wouldn't be the ideal solution forever, and I knew that the drive would start to go a little bit flaky. And unfortunately, you can't just move the drive from a Model 2 into a Model 1. So I couldn't just take the drive out of that and keep that one running. So I was waiting for a fix. But now this device has arrived, I thought, great, I can install the mode into my Model 1 and get my Model 1 back running again. So I went to the process of taking it all apart and installing it in the Model 1. And what happened, I plugged it all in, got it all running, started it up and discovered that I've got major graphical errors and sometimes it would just reset. It seems that one of the VDP chips in the Saturn is failing. They're quite a complex set of chips in the Saturn, and there's several chips that can actually fail. There's two visual display processing chips, and if either one of those fails, you'll either lose 2D graphics or 3D graphics. And I believe it's the 3D polygonal chip that I'm losing in this one. So that's going to need to be looked at. So I had to take everything out of that one, and I had to finally put them into my Model 2, which had a working disk drive, so I didn't want to do it, but hey ho. So that'll now be sent off for repair, and when it's done, I may transplant this stuff back to that one. I might not though, because to be honest, my Model 2, even though I prefer the Model 1, the Model 2 is a lot cleaner. So I might just stick with this one and sell the drive to somebody who will use it. So anyway, that's enough of the background on the Saturn anyway. So the mode itself, out of the box you get the device, and you also get a little tiny leaflet. Each of the devices is hard coded, so you've got your individual code on your device, and that allows you to download firmware updates. This is their version of firmware control to stop the device being cloned. I know there's a bit of an irony in the fact that something allows you to play copies has got a copy protection of sorts, but I can understand where they're coming from, because if people start putting the bad clones out there, people are going to be asking the original people for help with them, and they get sick of telling people, listen, we didn't make it, it's not up to date, it's got hacked code, we're not going to support it, So I understand why. But yeah, I mean, for £200 you do get a lot of system. Now you can run several different storage devices in here, as I'd explained. You can use USB flash drives, you can use USB hard drives plugged into another source, you can use micro SD cards, or you can use a hard drive, and you can actually use a combination of those if you want to increase the storage. Now, I happen to know a little bit about the size of ROM sets and what I want to play on here, so my personal preference for this, I've ordered 256GB SD card for this. Now, the reason I've done that is the entire Saturn ROM set, the complete set, runs to about 350GB. But in that, you've got to include a lot of demos, a lot of strange BIOS things, weird releases from Sega. several variations of certain game releases. There's a lot of fluff pieces like weird video samplers and things like that. Stuff most people aren't going to care about. Japanese RPGs without translation, so there's no point running them. A lot of sports games and stuff, nobody really cares about the annual refreshers of FIFA and things like that. I know we're talking about preservation, but I like to think about what I'm going to play. Now, thankfully, the 256 gigabytes, as I'm going to show you now, is actually enough to run. Pull this apart from here. It's actually enough to put on the entire UK set, minus those crappy demos I talked about, and a couple of sports games. So I've got like the latest version of FIFA on there, for example, but not all the ones before it. The entire American ROM set, which is actually a little bit smaller than the UK set, I believe. There was with the Saturn, there were quite a few games that only got specific regional releases. Japan got some really good releases that America and the UK didn't get. And then I've also got on there a good amount of Japanese games that I care about. I'll probably play around with them and trim a few more out as time goes. And when I eventually do get my Saturn modified, which I intend to do, obviously what I will do is I will get a 50-60 Hz switch for this. I'll run it in 60 Hz all of the time because it doesn't matter now on modern TVs. And what I will do is I'll probably dump the UK set away completely except for exclusives, and I will just run the complete American set and the complete Japanese set because I know there's enough room for that. So a 256 gigabyte SD card is plenty. It also means there's no extra current draw on the device because it's a very low power consumption for an SD card. So a 256 gigabyte card, and as well cost effective. 256 gigabyte has become the new entry level large capacity device now. You can get USB drives and SD cards for less than 30 quid at 256 gigabyte. If you go to the right sources for it, I always recommend going to mymemory.co.uk. They've done me some fantastic deals, and I've used them for all of my flash devices in recent years. And yeah, 256 gigabyte is plenty for most people's needs. You can use hard drives in this, like I say, but the ideal way to go is with an SSD. You will get a slight performance increase with an SSD, but of course you're going to pay for it. You know, a 512 gigabyte SSD is going to set you back a lot more than 30 quid, put it that way. So just something to bear in mind. So let's have a look what we've got. So by default, the loads up into a menu that looks a bit like this. I'm just going to switch this over. So it will start up and it will read the list, and then you can see I've got 3 set up on there. I'll just zoom back in onto the screen. Sorry guys, and position it back properly so you can get a good look at it. There we go, pretty much centered. So yeah, so I've got 3 folders available at the moment. We've got Europe, we've got Japan, and we've got USA. And if I jump into those, just take a second to read it. Like I said, there's a couple of hundred games on each in each category, so a couple of seconds loading is perfectly fine. And then you're presented with a typical list like you'd see on most devices. You do have a nice graphical user interface on this, which I quite like. I don't like nothing too fancy. At the end of the day, I'm used to using EverDrives, and EverDrives tend to only have like a text list. I know what most of the games are anyway, so I don't really need a graphical representation. As long as I've got a list there, that's fine. And you can see on there, I've got most things on there. The UK set, obviously, you can see we've got FIFA 96, 97, 98. But like there's things like baseball games and that I don't give a shit about, so they're not on there at all. But most of the popular games are on here, including some of the limited editions. You can actually also add ROM hacks and things like that to this, which is handy. And any demos are out there. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but of course you've got access to everything. So you load it up, and then you find the game that you want to play, and you hit A, and it will load up. And I'll just do that now, so you can see what the load times are like. And we go into the Sega logo, and I think I've got it on quick boot, so it tends to skip some of the loading screens. Put in versus mode, that was stupid. Let's give it a few seconds to load. Yeah, Virtua Fighter Remix, absolutely love that. Yeah, I'm going to come on to that in just a second, Rich. Yeah. Um, I'll come on to that and I'll explain a couple of things about it. Yeah, Virtua Fighter Remix. This is the version I tend to play if I play Virtua Fighter now, because it gets rid of those horrible polygonal characters. The polygons on the Saturn never looked as good as the arcade on this game anyway. It hasn't got quite as high a polygon count. So when they brought out this version, which has got the textured characters instead, I much preferred it. I mean, of course, the first game is not as good as the second one anyway, so I'd prefer to play that more. But no idea what the controls are. But it's playing that just fine. So just pair off and back on. Yeah, so this is what it looks like when you first pair up the system. You get your standard Saturn loading screen and the Sega logo. And you get a couple of seconds with the mode logo. And it reads the device. You can actually select the device by pressing Z on the control pad. And if you've got several devices on there, it will switch between reading the different ones. The way you set up the SD card is you actually set up two folders anyway. So on one device, you could have one that's got a Saturn folder and a Dreamcast folder if you just want to move that same device to the other console. But obviously no need to do that for me because I've got it all on one SD card. So if I go back into the menu here, you can see we've got a few options. If I hit C, we call up the options. So you've got a few options here. We've got list mode. If I flick this over, we can actually view it on the cover mode, which is what you saw when I first loaded it up. If I hit that, it just resets the system a second. And then if I go into the Europe folder, you can see we've now got a cover flow going on. Now the reason, I mean, this is a nice thing to have. If there's games on there you've never seen before, or games you've never played and you want to try them out, it helps to have some kind of visual representation. Now the covers, you can't just add super simple. If you go to the Mode website, they have actually created a full pack for all regions, which you just download as a single bin file. You copy it over onto your card. It will automatically identify the games, probably from their, I don't know if it's picking up the good set naming or whether it's picking it up from the CRCs on the actual disc images or not. I'm not quite sure how it's doing it, but if it recognises that the game's there, it adds the artwork to it and it automatically assigns it to it. The reason I say I'm not sure is because there are a couple of games on here where there is no cover for it, and it's not because it's not been added to the file, it's just not showing on mine for some reason. I don't know if that's because it's the image I've used or what, but yeah, there are a couple of covers missing. I haven't come across any just yet scrolling down, but because they've even added covers for things like Christmas Nights. This was a special edition that they released for anybody who doesn't know. In fact, I'll just jump into that now. And this time, when you press A to launch, it gives you a little synopsis about the game. I don't know. I still quite don't know how you scroll down. To be honest, it might be L and R. No, it's not. But there's quite a bit of information about the game and a couple of screenshots the year it was produced and things like that. But yeah, they've even added covers for games like this. Now, this game didn't get a full release. It was a special edition you got, I think, with Nights on its initial release. I think in Japan it came on with one of the magazines as like a special edition or something like that. But yeah, it's a special edition that's just got Christmas theming in it. I'll just launch it up actually and show you. I think we can play this game without the digital control pad. Sorry, the analog control pad. This had its own dedicated analog controller with it. There you go. This game contains calendar activated features. Please enter the correct date. If you change it to Christmas, it does actually set like the Christmas theming and everything. But everything is Christmas themed anyway, I think. I have actually replaced the BIOS battery in this Saturn, so it is actually showing the correct time and date and everything. I had to do that when I pulled these out of storage because I hadn't done it for a while. Absolutely love Nights for anybody who's not played it before. Thought you got if you played normal Nights of Christmas Day. There is something to that effect, mate, but I think they released this version which allowed it to have the Christmas theme and everything you know, by default. Because I'm pretty sure this intro is slightly different to the standard game. There you go, you can hear the bells and everything. I think it runs the detection for the analog pad now. There you go. Nights into Dreams limited edition. How's it going, Rich? You alright? We'll just start a new game. It is working. I was never sure if you could actually play this game with a standard control pad. Once you get into it, Andy, it's a really cool game. You just got to take your time and not die straight away like I just did, and not go the wrong way. Yeah, you can play with a digital pad. The ideal way to play this, of course, is to play it with the analog pad because you get much better control. You have to do a lot of loops and follow a course, and you can boost your way there. It's been a long time since I played it, but it's an incredible game once you actually get into it and start following the paths and everything. A lot of cool effects. But yeah, so that's running perfectly fine. So yeah, PAL game's absolutely fine, running with the covers and everything. Now, I'll be honest, I don't actually run this with the covers. As you might have seen when I was running down the list, the caching of the files is a little bit slow. And have I knocked the plug again? Yeah. So I keep knocking the aerial lead at the back, and occasionally it doesn't load. It doesn't show straight away. So yeah, so you can see it takes a little bit longer to load the covers and everything. Because I'm familiar with the device's games and everything, I don't particularly need to have the covers up. I mean, it scrolls pretty fast. If you press down, you can see it's going down the list pretty quick, as quick as I need it to. It scrolls up and down, but it's a bit of a slow way of browsing the list, if you ask me, because you're only seeing 10 titles on screen at once, and it only shows the name of it when you actually pass the cursor over it. So it's quite easy to sail past what you're looking for. You know, as it scrolls screen, like I'm going from Guardian Heroes to Hexen. If I was looking for Hebereki's Pepito or Hang On GP96, I'd have skipped it by and it would have been immediately apparent, you know. It does take a couple of seconds to load. Hopefully they will improve that load time with subsequent firmware updates. When I actually got the device out the box, a few of the options were missing, and there was already an updated firmware version available from the site. So I downloaded that. You start up your device, and it automatically updates the system for you. So now it's added a few extra features that I didn't have originally. So yeah, I mean, my personal preference actually is to run it without the graphical user interface because it just seems a lot quicker to me. And it just works a lot better for my needs. You know, you can see at a glance what games you're looking at. You can easily scroll down the list and find what you're looking for. I prefer to do it this way myself. But it is nice that you've got that option. And if they do improve the caching time, or maybe they add a cache rather than relying on the Saturn's cache, maybe if they built into the card, so those images instantly load, that would be a lot better. Worth mentioning, if you're using a solid state drive, those do actually load a little bit quicker. And if you're using this on a Dreamcast, they load pretty much instantly. So I don't know whether it's linked to system performance or what. They're only very small images, they're not massive bitmaps or anything. So they should load quickly. So hopefully they'll address that in future firmware updates. But it's worth mentioning that at the moment I prefer browsing it this way because it's just a lot easier to find the game that you're looking for. It might even be better if they actually added the name of the game underneath the cover as well. So when you're browsing through quickly, it's easy to find what you want. But yeah, for now I prefer it this way. No problem, Rich. You can finish watching this video when you get back, mate, if you need to. So don't worry about that. The new Retro Fighters Saturn pads are pretty nice. Not seen them, to be honest, Andy. I might have a look to see what they're like anyway. So it loads the games perfectly fine. You've got a few more options in here. if I press C here, you can see you can turn on or off auto region patching. Now, you can't actually force 50 or 60 hertz properly just yet. They're still working on that. But it does support ROMs from all regions, and pretty much everything I've tried so far runs. They can't guarantee it's 100% compatible, but most of the games I've tried do work. So if you turn that on, when I go to any game that I've got, like from America or Japan, it will automatically patch the code, so it will read and run that game perfectly fine. That's exactly the same as what the Sega Saturn device does, and it allows you to play games from other regions. However, it will only play them in 50 hertz because that's all that my Saturn can output at the moment. So the games will be a little bit slower, and they won't display, full screen. So until I get a 60 hertz mod, the best I can hope for is to be able to play those games in 50 hertz, which is fine for now. You've got fast boot option. You can turn that on or off. There's one or two games that might have a problem if you turn that on. All it does is it skips a couple of the BIOS check screens that you usually get on the disc loading, like the Sega logo coming up a second time. If you turn that on, it should skip those, but it might stop some games from loading, or it might trigger like a copy protection or something like that. So I leave that off because it's negligible the amount of time you get for the loading anyway. You notice when I loaded both of those games, just the loading is significantly faster than disc loading. Someone did a comparison video online, not with this device, but with the Rear and the Phoebe, and just using a flash device. Disc loading time is about 45 seconds from boot up to first game. It showed several games where like disc load up time to scan into a game is something like 10 or 15 seconds when using a flash device. So, it's like a 66% increase in speed, and that's going to be a lot better on games that have got multi-loading. Quite a few of the fighters on the Saturn had multi-loading because it hasn't got a massive amount of memory, and obviously some games need the 4 MB expansion cartridge. Those games I'll mention now before somebody asks. You do still currently need the 4 MB expansion cartridge if you want to play those games. So games like X-Men vs Street Fighter. I'm trying to think of all the other games. I think Castlevania Symphony of the Night. There's actually a really good hack you can get that fully utilises the 4 MB for this, because the Saturn port was quite bad for multi-loads and things like that. Somebody's modified it so you can actually take advantage of the 4 MB cartridge, and it's a much better experience. But I haven't actually got my 4 MB cartridge to hand at the moment, so I can't show you those games. But yeah, you do currently still need those. I hope there's a way, in some way, at some point, maybe they can incorporate the 4 MB boosting into the device itself, but none of the current devices actually do that. If they could do that, it would be brilliant. If they could incorporate game saves into the system as well, that would be awesome, but you can't currently do that. So game saves are still dependent on your internal memory storage on your Saturn, or using expansion cartridge. At the moment, there's no way to save it to the device. Hopefully they will try and integrate that in the future. It's not there just yet. You can disable the lid switch. That's a good idea, because if you want to actually change disc on a multi-disc game, I can't actually show you that because you need to obviously play a game through to a certain point to do that. I've got lid switch disabled, so when you open the disc lid, it doesn't kick the system into going straight to the CD interface that you would usually get when you open the disc drive. There's two buttons on the device, like I explained. One of those is it's for troubleshooting and things like that. The other one is like a disc switch button. So when you actually add games to the SD card or whatever storage device you've got, you put them all into one folder, and what it will do is it will automatically seek out and find the next disc in line, and then when you get to the appropriate part on your game where it tells you to switch disc, all you do is you pop the lid, you press the button on the device there, and it will automatically then kick in and load the next disc in the sequence. So games like Panzer Dragoon Saga, for example, that uses 4 discs in total. It means you can completely play those games from start to finish without any problems at all. So for anybody who's been wondering about that, no problems here at all with that. Starting video mode, I've got that set up as PAL at the moment because obviously that's what my system is, and that's all it can output. But then you've got video system output pin. I think you can actually set a priority. So if you've got an auto switching 50-60 hertz mod, you can actually set it to auto output in whatever output format you want to. So or prioritize the different ones. So you can have it to auto detect and then default to PAL. You can have it to force auto detect and default to NTSC, or you can have it to force NTSC or force PAL. No real need to do that on this. Like I say, it can't output 60 hertz by default anyway. So at the moment, I've got it set to auto and PAL until such time as I change that. Got a couple of options here I didn't actually have on the initial firmware version. The original firmware version, there was no options. Well, there was an option to change it, but it didn't work. The way I've got it is I've got reset input behavior. Once you've actually loaded a game, if you then press reset, by default the game would reload as if it would, like you would do with an original disc. Rather than going through the full boot process again, it'll just load up the game rather than going through the full BIOS and everything. Uh, Initially with this, if you hit reset, that would be the only way you could do it. Now you've got a couple of options you can change. So when you can have it so when you hit reset, it actually goes back and loads the mode up again, rather than doing a full power cycle of the system. I prefer it that way myself, but if I'm going to be playing a game that I want to play from start to finish, or I'm going to be swapping characters, or like a fighting game if I'm doing badly and I want to quickly reset, but I don't want to go through the mode boot up process, you can actually set that to just go to normal reset, and then it will just reset and load that game straight back up without going to the mode menu. At the moment I've got it set up to boot to menu because I'm switching between games a lot. Every time I want to reset, I don't have to do a full power cycle. Reset output signal pulse. I'm not quite sure what that's used for. It is in the instructions. I'm not quite sure what it's there for, but anyway, yeah, that's the way I've got it set up at the moment. And when you do the soft reset, you can have it to go to back to the CD player and then launch mode, or straight back into loading the mode interface. I've got it set up that way. You can do certain things. I think you can change the boot BIOS to load the foreign versions of the BIOS instead. You can also manually check for the updates if you've got the update on your card and it didn't auto update when you first turned on the system. And you can also call up things like the hard disk drive information, like storage space left, things like that. But obviously I'm not using a hard drive, so that's irrelevant to me. And then of course you've got your version there, so it just tells you what version you're running, your serial number and everything. So but yeah, so everything runs perfectly fine there in European mode. I'll just show you that it does run the other regions. So we'll quickly fire up American game, and you can see if I do actually turn on covers here, just to show you, you'll see that the cover set for the different regions is actually custom to each region. So it's not just using the same covers. So you can see like you've got the white border there of the American games, and you can see there's one game that has actually got the cover missing. They may not have just added to the set at this point, but I'll go back and check all that at a later point. But yeah, there's got covers for all the American games as well. And we'll load up. We'll go with Daytona. Now I've put on here the Daytona Championship Circuit Edition, Netlink Edition. That's a version we didn't get over here, and I don't know if you can still use the network link to local network link these, or create some kind of server to do a big multi-link game. But I'll put it on here just in case. We'll experiment with that at some point. Just to load up and show you that everything's running fine with this. And there you go, it's the Sega Sports logo. And into the game. Unfortunately, the Championship Circuit Edition never had the same Daytona music that we're all familiar with, rather annoyingly. We'll just fire this up and just show you it's all working sweet. But obviously, like I say, this is running 50 hertz mode, not 60 hertz mode, so it's a little bit slower than it should be, unfortunately. But at least we can play from the different regions, and at least it displays properly on the screen, even in 50 hertz. Get the right button for accelerate. Unfortunately, Daytona on the Saturn was a little bit disappointing for me because it suffered from really bad draw distances. The Saturn hardware, unfortunately, suffered from that problem quite badly because it only had limited RAM, and you can see the things popping into the background with quite shocking frequency. I mean, PlayStation games never did that at the time, and you think Sega handling their own ports, they'd have been able to find a way around that. And obviously, it's running only at 30 frames per second rather than the 60 frames per second like the arcade did. A little bit sad they never managed to get the performance out of this that the PlayStation did out of its System 11 ports. The Dreamcast version, obviously, a whole lot better than this. But there you go, that's an American game and that's running perfectly well. So if I hit reset now, it should reset back into loading the mode menu up. Because I think I saved the option before I actually left it. Is it going to load the game? I don't know. I know it is loading back into mode. I couldn't remember where I'd left it on. So yeah, you can see they booted back into the CD menu and then loads the mode menu. And just to show you a couple of Japanese games that do work, you can see the Japanese covers. Japanese covers are always a bit strange. There was never any major branding on them. I always found that with most consoles it was the same situation. They didn't have like a big Saturn logo on there like the British one would have. Not immediately apparent if you didn't know what they were intended for. You can see quite a few of these covers here have just been taken from like packing games and things like that. There's better covers available for download on the site, I'm sure. So when it gets round to it, I'll have a look on there and see if there's better covers available for some of these. It's probably not recognising the covers for some of them because I've slightly changed the naming of them. But I'll just show you that a couple of these do work. One of my favourites, which I'm no good at, but it's an amazing game, and I had to have on here. And unfortunately, when you buy this, I remember this being one of the last games that I saw for the Saturn being out, and that you could actually buy from the shops. And I remember one of the local specialist shops here that dealt in import games. I remember seeing this brand new on the shelves at the time, and it was 175 quid to buy. And its collecting prices now are astronomical, absolutely astronomical. So, from a perspective of collecting and preserving and things like that, I know there's a lot of people out there who are purists and they want to collect original games and things like that. But with the price of some of these games, you're never going to own the originals. The price of this game now, I think it runs into £300-400 or something like this. It's a game you'd never get to play on original hardware. You'd be able to emulate it maybe, but not play on original hardware. And so, with a device like this now, you're getting to play the original game on original hardware without having to use a crappy copy that might get scratched up and not work very well. So I think that's pretty cool. And I'm not being able to run it in 60 hertz here, but at least I can play it on a UK Saturn. It's one of those kind of crazy bullet hell shooters for anybody who's never seen it. The sequel was available on the Dreamcast and the GameCube, I believe. Ikaruga. But yeah, this is the first game, Radiant Silvergun. It's such a cool shooter. I suck at it because, like most bullet hell shooters, it's ridiculously hard. But very good game. It's got like 3D polygonal sprite. It's like a 2D game, but it uses 3D models and everything. So really cool. Got loads of different firepower options. You got a reverse fire there. You've got heat-seeking lasers which focus on enemies as they appear, like that. You've got side lasers. You've got a shield you can actually create there to hold the two buttons together. That pretty much destroys anything it touches, but it's hard to use. Actually, playing at 50 hertz is more to my liking because it's such a hard game to play. It's a little bit slower. It allows you to actually play it and be quite good at it. Yeah, I know. Well, that's the thing. See, I'm not decided yet as to whether I'm going to keep the mode in this Model 2 Saturn or whether I'm going to move it to the Model 1. But I mean, I am debating because I got my Model 1 fixed anyway. I might actually get the Model 1 50 and 60 hertz modded and region modded, and then transplant this over into that because I'd like to have it 60 hertz if I can. Some people have said just buy a foreign Saturn. The problem is with that is you can't use a UK power supply on foreign Saturns because the power supply is internal. It means you've got to use a step down, which is an ideal way to play foreign ones. At least if I get my UK model modded, then I can have 60 hertz and use a UK power supply just like normal people. That's handy when we're doing events and that because you've not always got enough step down transformers available to to plug everything in. So yeah, I'd rather use a UK Saturn that's been 50, 60 hertz modded. And now I've got my mode. Once I decide which one I'm going to go for, I can actually modify that one, put my mode in there, and play everything in 60 hertz. And obviously, then I can do away with most of the UK Rom set because there weren't many regional differences, and it means that I can run the full American set, and then the Japanese games, the Japanese exclusives, a few PAL exclusives, I can run those on here as well, and I can run them in 60 hertz, so they play a little bit better as well. So yeah. So guys, there's not much else to talk about. How's it going? As you alright, mate? Hope you're enjoying your holiday. To be honest, I'm not focusing too much on the games when I'm doing these videos. I'm focusing on the talking more than anything. Is that going to reset to it? Oh no, see that's loaded the game straight back up. I haven't set the options properly. I need to set those up properly. But yeah, so that is the Terraonion mode, guys. A really cool system. A couple of people have now asked me. The biggest question is, if you've already got a Saturn that is modified, do you take the plunge and do you invest in a mode? Well, the short answer, guys, is no, and I'm going to tell you why. Even though the system is designed to be, multifunctional, work with the Dreamcast and the Saturn, even though it's got all the best features, like I say, with the cover flow and all the different options you can load up, it's not worth. It hasn't got enough features to justify removing your old rear or Phoebe and replacing it with this because you got to pay like another £100 on top of what you've already forked out for. Even though this is compatible with more ISO formats and things like that, you can just drag and drop your ROMs, your ISOs onto here. As long as you've got good dumps, you can drag and drop those onto here. It is a lot better in that respect. It's not worth replacing your rear or your Phoebe, and certainly not your GDMU for this because it's, in my opinion, it's just not worth the extra buck for what it does. On the Dreamcast, yes, you've got the added advantage. You can obviously install a hard drive on there and get the complete Dreamcast set potentially on a hard drive. That is the only good thing it's good for. The wisdom of switching it between a Saturn and a Dreamcast like it's intended to do, I wouldn't personally do that. It doesn't make much sense. If you haven't got a device for your Saturn yet, I would say this is the one to go for. I've tried a few of the devices now. This has got everything you need your flash device to do. You've got a graphical user interface. You've got a load of options. It's got the widest ISO support. It supports all the regions, and its install is nice and clean. It does support all version Saturns, whereas the rear or the Phoebe, you can only buy one device for the certain Saturn that you're using it on. So it has to be, you have to pick between a 20 or a 21 pin. Setting up the device is a lot more complex to do as far as dragging and dropping ROMs on there. It's not nearly as clean to do, and you've got the bullshit order process. The Fenrir is looking promising, but right now the firmware isn't quite there. It doesn't support multi-disc games. I don't think it's got quite as many options. It may be a good budget option, but until it supports multi-disc games, I would say the Fenrir hold back on a little bit. And Satiator, you're going to be waiting forever for, so don't even bother holding your breath for that. It may never come to full fruition. If you're going to buy an optical drive emulator for a Saturn, get this one. It is worth the extra buck for it. As far as the Dreamcast goes, yes, this performs brilliantly on the Dreamcast. Yes, it does support hard drives. Um, but my personal opinion is if you're going to get a Dreamcast one, get the GDMU. And by that, don't even bother trying to get the original one because you're going to the same guy who's causing the problems with the rear and the feed. Don't go to him because his order process is way too convoluted. He's not accepting help on getting them produced and outsourced elsewhere, and that's forced the clone to be created. And from what I understand, the clone GDMU is loads cheaper. You can get one for about 40 or 50 quid. And unlike a lot of the clone EverDrives, which are a bit naff, the clone GDMU is functionally identical to the current production GDMU, and he's not going to add any features anytime soon. He never even came out with a graphical user interface. The community created their own for the GDMU, and it does work exactly the same on the clone GDMU. So his pace of improvement isn't getting any better, and the way he handles his orders isn't great, and it's been a complaint for people for a long time. So my advice is, if you've got a Saturn, no device, get the mode. Honestly, it really is worth the money, and it'll preserve your Saturn for a long time to come. And with the CD drives failing, this is going to be the best way to go. Don't wait for the Satiator; it's likely never to come. As far as the GDMU goes, get the clone version. You're going to be able to get it a lot cheaper. There's no point in getting a mode for. I wouldn't say this is worth the 200 odd quid just to be able to get the full ROM set on one place for the Dreamcast. I'd say it's better off paying 50 quid to get the GDMU, download the GDMU clone, download the graphical user interface, so you've got the screenshots and everything, and just use a couple of SD cards. It's the cheapest way to go, or a couple of USB drives. It's far better option than this, I think, for the Dreamcast. Moving it between the two is just not going to be practical, even in a home setting. It's not worth buying two separate devices for this and for the Dreamcast, in my opinion. I'd have been happier if they'd have just created this device just for the Saturn and made it a little bit cheaper, to be honest, because I can't see many people are bragging about it being compatible with both devices. I can't see many people really choosing to buy this over a GDMU with a price difference. 50 quid for a GDMU clone versus like 250 quid for this. Is 200 quid extra really worth it just to have hard drive support? I don't think it is, in my personal opinion. So, but that's just my opinion. You might feel differently. As much as I like to preserve these things, much I'm willing to pay extra for a device that encapsulates everything in one flash solution. I'm not for the idea of just spending out for the sake of having features that aren't really practical. So that's just my 2 quid's worth anyway. So anyway, guys, that is my review of the Mode. It's a great device. I highly recommend getting one for your Saturn. And I think pre-orders are in place now, because this was actually a pre-order. I ordered back in May or June, I think it was, and it only came in the last couple of weeks. Pre-orders are now open for the next batch, I think, and I think they'll be arriving in September. After that, they will have plenty in stock, I believe. But this is going to be the safest bet, and yeah, I highly recommend getting one while you can, because when it comes to flash devices, there's no telling when they might stop production at any point. Quite a few of the old flash devices for certain devices no longer available, so grab them while you can. The firmware's there right now. It does everything you want it to. So yeah, get one. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. I'll be back on Tuesday, I believe, and in that I'll be actually finally recovering the GC loader for the GameCube, which is another one I was waiting on. And obviously I'll show them some pictures of that, and I'll be talking about that on Tuesday. But for now, enjoy the rest of your Sunday, guys, and I'll catch